objective. To deliver the NBA to you like no other. News. Play breakdowns. Power rankings. Storylines you never hear talked about. Anywhere else. It's all straight shots here. Fired by straight shooters. S and Gunn. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. I am Esfandiar Baraheni, joined by my co-host Lauren Gunn. Lauren, how was your weekend?
It was good. It's a long weekend for us. Today's MLK Day, so I'm off from work, which is a wonderful thing. Just makes my Mondays that much easier, so things are good. Yep,
absolutely. And as the NBA celebrates the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and, his work in the 60s and 70s, especially, as a civil rights activist, political, economic, social, racial, we have a bunch of basketball games as well. Thanks to that, we have a full slate of basketball, which is going to be awesome to watch. Starting at 1 p.m. today, we're recording as this game starts with Boston and Charlotte. And then there's going to be a couple of day games, actually a bunch of day games throughout the day. A lot of matinee affairs, which is something I love. It kind of takes me back to the bubble. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
That was the best part of the bubble to me, where it was like, oh man, all day basketball, and you can just throw it on there. So
God,
it was fun. Folks, we're not going to be talking about the games today, but we do have, something that we've been working on over this past weekend, thinking about, if you will. This was an idea that Lauren brought to me, and I'm like, oh, we got to do this. Yes, we have to do this. It is the top 5 young cores in the NBA. Young as in youthful, cores as in cores. So look, the criteria we've kind of established for this, that it has to be a 25 and under. So it can be a 25-year-old. It could also be under than 25 years old. Also, I don't know if you did this, but I did this. I established core as multiple players, right?
100%.
Okay, cool. Because there's another list out there in the sphere of things of just these like massive superstar players that are also under 25 years old, but they're the only guy on that one team. So I'll list them just for the people at home, okay? Luka Doncic on the Dallas Mavs. Sorry, you're not making the young core list, even though I would definitely take you over every single player we're about to mention. Boston, Jason Tatum, also under 25 years old. I believe he's 24, but regardless, not going to be included in this list. You and Grant Williams are not a young core, okay? Right. The Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards, although there are a couple of other young pieces, you can argue Jaden McDaniels, but still not going to be including into the young core. Charlotte with LaMelo Ball. I do not think there are anybody else out there. When you get Wemby, you will be in this conversation.
Facts.
And even just aside, I guess the Sixers with Tyrese Maxey, I also said, you know what, like, you're a young guy, probably going to be an all-star, but I'm not going to be including you in young cores. Even outside of those players, though, outside of those teams, there are so many great young players in the NBA.
Yeah, this was difficult. This was hard.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I was like, oh, there's my number one. That's my number one young core. Right. I would kind of keep looking at this list and I would be like, and then I'd play around with it. And then all of a sudden the team that I just said was number one is now number 4. And I just am like, this is impossible. And so ultimately I came up with kind of a systematic approach to how am I going to go about it? Because the number one thing is obviously, you have a core as multiple players. It's not Luka, Mavs, you're not even on my list because it's just, that's the reality of it. And so, my criteria kind of going through it is all-star level potential or current, I guess, status. And how many of those players are there and long-term trajectory, how do I rank those guys? And it's hard. You could, for me, you could make a case to kind of reorder, honestly, like so many of them, if not all of them. But
Yeah.
But I did finalize and ultimately come up with a list that I feel good about.
I am very curious to see if we end up with the same list.
The same. I feel like that's so unlikely because it's so hard. It really is so hard. And honestly, I have a hot take that it might just have to be the soundbite because some people are going to be like, oh.
Okay. All right.
I firmly stand behind this take, but this season, I will admit it is a poorly timed take, but in the long term, I stand by it 1000%. I do.
I think I know who you're talking about. They probably made my honorable mention. I'm excited. Okay. I have a feeling I know who you're talking about. They're a team I was bullish on coming into the season and was heavily disappointed. So am I kind of
I think we might. I don't think we're talking about. I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Okay, interesting. Just before we get to that, just as an aside, did you end up watching the Lakers-Sixers game from last night? Or at least the end of it with the call and Russell Westbrook and
I saw that part and I followed along because I had some betting actually going on, but I did not watch all 48 minutes.
Speaking of some betting action, think you know what way it's going to go? Make your bet at Sports Interaction. Whatever your sport, like Lauren, Sports Interaction has you covered. Pre-game, live betting on all major sports and prop bets. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. I am killing these segues, by the way.
You really are.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, no, the Lakers and Sixers game was interesting for the final play, really, because it was an amalgamation, like a summation kind of what Russell Westbrook is as a player. He had an awesome game. The Lakers played a really, really good game against a good Sixers team. And then down the stretch, Westbrook just decided to take things on his own and go with that transition attempt that ended up being I think, to be honest with you, I did see the foul, but they didn't see the foul on the play. And whether that is, what we kind of argue about, that's a different story. I think that was a good summation of what the Russell Westbrook problem is in Los Angeles. Yes, he's been better than last season, and he's been good for them in stretches. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it is tough to consider him when you need guys to win playoff series. Like we mentioned this in episode 1, where it's like they just need guys. They need guys who can play in the playoffs. It's tough relying on Russell Westbrook. Hello, Winston.
He sends his regards.
He sends his regards. Winston sends his regards. Exactly. I just imagine Winston has a British accent, by the way. I don't know why.
How did you know? I have no idea how you know that.
Absolutely.
But he sure does.
Yes. No, but when it comes to Russell Westbrook, that really showed you, like, yes, he's been good for them, but at the end of the day, that's not a guy that they can rely on in a playoff series, just because of the fact that there are those chaotic moments. And when you're in crunch time and you need a bucket, if that's the type of thing you're going to get, you're going to end up losing a lot of games in the playoffs because of it. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with the Lakers. I don't want to make this Lakers-centric because they do not have a young core.
They definitely do not have that.
Yeah. So there were like 3 teams that I just said do not have. Mm-hmm. That is the Los Angeles Clippers, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Milwaukee Bucks. I just wrote beside them, don't have young core, because they really don't. They are relying on older players, and they don't have that young guy that is kind of coming up beside them, if you will. So I'm curious what your first team is. Do you want to go from 5 to 1? Did you rank them? Yeah,
I did rank them. I had to rank them. I think we need to go 5 to 1. More suspense that way.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. So give me your number 5.
This is where the hot take is, right here.
Oh yeah,
okay. We're just starting off with it. I have the Thunder at number 5.
Oh, hey. They're higher on my list. Don't worry. Keep
That's
cooking.
why I think it's a bit of a hot take, because I see what Shea's doing. I'm not discounting Shea.
Okay.
Part of it has to do with the fact that we haven't seen Chet yet, who I am very high on. But again, the biggest thing, and I'm going to say this a million times so people don't roast me, is that it is the quantity of players and not just the quantity of, potential franchise cornerstones or even players that you could build around at the top. But even the 4, 5, 6 for me, and that's why they're number 5, because it's the 4, 5, 6. It's let me say 3, 4, 5, 6 for me.
Okay,
that puts them at number 5.
So, okay, for me, I kind of went at it that way too.
Yeah.
But I also, so once I kind of listed out the teams, I'm like, okay, who has the best player here in this group of teams? SGA obviously is near the top of that list.
Yes, for sure.
When it comes to talking about these young cores, I mean, you can obviously talk about Ja, Zion, etc. But SGA is 100% near the top of this list. I think that matters because he's a franchise cornerstone type of player. He's doing things, in my opinion, that put him in that caliber of like a top 10, top 12 player in the league this season. I imagine that as he grows and as he gets better, it'll just improve. And he's only 24 years old. Right. They have a lot of young guys under 25. So they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, who I think is a nice guy, Pokusevski, Trey Mann, Chet Holmgren, Josh Giddey. And then they have these other guys like Ousmane Dieng and the other Jalen Williams and Darius Bates. They have a lot of young players. The quantity is there for me. Yeah. And I've put them a little bit higher. I have them one spot higher than you do. And I think that was because debating between this team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the fifth team that I'm about to tell you, SGA was just the better player of the bunch. So he kind of outweighed it. The fifth team that I have is the Orlando Magic. Do you have them?
I sure do have them.
Is it swapped? Are we
sure
literally?
Is.
Oh, come on. That's ridiculous.
My hot take. Paolo over Shai. That's my hot take right there. I know it's ill-timed. It's ill-timed, but I stand by it. I am so high on Paolo. I see it. Every aspect of the game, the way he wins, both sides of the ball, the leadership, the ability to fit in. I see it. And it's not that I think Shai can't do that, can't bring you winning basketball. I totally think that.
Oh, well, he's doing it right now. I mean,
he is. Right now, how I view them in terms of young core, because with young core comes long-term kind of what you're talking about there, like in terms of projection. And so with the Magic and with building around Paolo, I think that they can have much more success than the Thunder, even though the Thunders have the picks. I'm talking about current players and how you're going to slide in pieces around them, trades out of the picture. I'm with the Magic. And I also have, I like Franz more than I like Josh. I love Josh Giddey, but that's my logic there.
Well, I'm a big fan of Paolo too. I am. I think a guy who is 6'10", 250 pounds, has all the tools to be like, I was watching the game against the Nuggets last night, which was a great game, by the way. Nikola Jokic hit the game winner, had a stone cold face. It was hilarious. You guys should absolutely watch that final little stretch. Bull had his reunion and had his revenge. I think he had like 22 and 13 or something. And Markelle Fultz was awesome. The Magic are a really, really fun team. And I put them into this young core because I think they absolutely deserve to be there because of Paolo, because of the fact that Franz Wagner is also, I think, in a similar tier of player to Paolo. I think Franz is heavily underrated.
Yes.
And that comes from a guy who, obviously with the Raptors and, Scottie Barnes covering them last year, there was this big debate between, the Raptors were going to take Franz Wagner. The Raptors, they were eyeing Jalen Suggs and they went with Scottie instead and whatnot, right? But Franz and Paolo are kind of like two sides of the same coin in the sense that they are big, they are playmakers, they can create their own shots. They both have size.
Yeah.
And that is going to help them go a long way in the NBA when it comes to them becoming all-stars and potentially even superstars. No question about it. But I would rather have the product right now, which is why I say SGA. And I think there's a good chance that Paolo ends up being a top 10 player in the league. I think there's a very good chance that Franz Wagner can be in that same upper echelon, maybe, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, they have Markelle Fultz, Bull, Mo Bamba. So there is a really, really fun nucleus there of young players.
Right.
And if they end up losing a little bit more this year, they could probably add another top 5-ish pick. They also have the Chicago pick from this year as well. And if Chicago falls off the wagon, they have 2 lottery picks that they can throw in there. I think your Magic pick is fair. the only reason I would give OKC the edge right now is because SGA is legit. Like, look, if he was on any other team, I think he would be mentioned as an MVP candidate for his performance right now.
Disagree with that.
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of that. I would personally go ahead and take Shea. I mean, the guy is averaging 35 and 5 with 2 steals and a block and 35 minutes a night. The Thunder, by the way, ended up beating the Brooklyn Nets last night. And the Thunder are pretty close to getting into play-in contention, which is something that's really interesting because a lot of people imagined that they would tank. They're 21 and 23. They've won 3 in a row. They're 6 and 4 in their last 10, and they are tied for 10th. Actually, no, they're tied for 11th right now with the Phoenix Suns, but they have a pretty simple, I wouldn't say easy schedule, but they have a pretty good schedule. I wouldn't be shocked if we end up seeing the Thunder in a play-in game this year.
Yeah.
Which is kind of different from what my expectations were of this team. I imagine they would be frisky enough to maybe win like 30-ish games, but they're looking like they might win 39 to 40-something games. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's really hard when you have a guy like Shea that just plays at that level because, I mean, we've seen it in the past with the Thunder and with Shea specifically, times when they've maybe shut him down for the season or maybe rested him a little bit more to kind of emphasize that tanking philosophy. But when he's playing like this and he's very clearly not struggling with any nagging injuries, it's so hard to slow down a guy like that. And Josh Giddey is another guy that's having a really, really solid year. So I do love the Thunder. I just gotta say this on the Magic. For me, it's also the Wendell Carter Jr., the Jalen Suggs, the Cole Anthony. I would take all 3 of those guys over, again, the 4, 5, 6 guy. Well, let me say, actually the 4, 5, 6 guys at OKC. And so for me, that is kind of where right now OKC, like, to me, their kind of talent like goes like this, whereas to me, Orlando's is like a kind of a consistent, maybe not as with the Shea in terms of now. But I just think it's so fascinating because ultimately we're going to be talking about them sometime. Like we're going to probably talk about the 2 teams that we have at the top here in just probably a few years now because there's just so much talent.
So I feel like we do have after this we probably have the same list. I'm curious to see what your third team is, but I think it's the same. I think it's the same. So my thing with OKC is you have to decide how high you are on Chet Holmgren, and that's an impossible task to have because the man is going to be missing his rookie year. He's obviously one of those bigs that you kind of have questions about how they deal with injuries and his frame and whatnot. And everybody had those type of questions coming into the draft. With Chet Holmgren, I think there's a lot of potential there that he can be a rookie of the year candidate next season. That he can kind of, him, Wemby, Scoot Henderson is kind of going to be the 3-way race for rookie of the year. I really am high on Chet Holmgren. I think what he could bring to a team like OKC as a floor spacer, as a rim protector. Him and Poku can play that, like Poku being the weak side rim protector and Chet Holmgren kind of feasting guys away as the main rim protector. Then you have the pick and roll, pick and pop options with SGA and Giddey that he can play with. So and also on top of that, he's a pretty good playmaker. So my thing is I'm high on Chet Holmgren. I think I'm probably on the opposite side for a lot of people because I think some people are skeptical about health related issues for Chet and whatnot. But if he can stay healthy, I believe that is a surefire all-star player. And I don't know. I'm really high on him. I'm really high on the fit between him and SGA as well. And you mentioned Giddey earlier, but Giddey's a guy who has had some skeptics, if you will, this season. A lot of people have been questioning his legitimacy as kind of like a young core piece, if you will. I think that notion is ridiculous, obviously because he's super young. But on top of that, he just has a lot of the let's say like the intangible feel side of things for a basketball game. And I think those type of players, even if they don't turn out to be all-stars, even if they don't turn out to be star players, that's a guy that can be your 4th or 5th starter That easily, very, very easily. And I think that's very, very fair to say about Josh Giddey. I imagine, look, the potential for him is high. He has to figure out the jump shot. He has to get a little bit better on the defensive end and kind of fighting through screens and whatnot. But when it comes to the actual productivity out there, him making plays, him crashing the boards, all that is really, really good. He is elite at that. And the scoring, he'll figure out the scoring in some way, right? I think a lot of people looked at him as like a Australian Ricky Rubio.
I was thinking about Ricky Rubio. It's funny that you said that.
It's kind of there. I mean, I could see it.
Yeah, it is kind of there. It is kind of there. Personally, I don't understand the skepticism, kind of similar to where you're coming from. And yes, a big part of it is the youth, but he just, when you watch him, like you said, he has a good feel for the game. He knows how to move the ball. He's got great, in my opinion, great playmaking vision.
Yeah.
And so I think when you don't have to expect him to be the quarterback of your offense or even, the primary ball handler because you have a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, having a guy like Josh Giddey to have your average backcourt height being 6'6", that's crazy. That's really crazy to have that. And so, and not only are they big in terms of size, he fills up the stat sheet. Maybe the scoring, like you said, will hopefully come with time, especially with the shooting, but the assists, the rebounding, like he does do that stuff. He's just maybe not the most, well, I would say that he's a little flashy, but in terms of athleticism, maybe not the flashiest there. So I like Josh. I like the fit there. And I, even to your point with Chet Holmgren, how he's going to come into the mix there and potentially maybe not carry's the wrong word, but be this either probably the second scoring option with Shai.
Absolutely,
that will also make Josh's life easier. And I think the three of them together is going to be a really, really interesting core, I guess. And then you'll have, Lou Dort and even maybe Darius Baisley, we'll see. But I think they're going to really have some interesting pieces to kind of slide in and complement the three of those in terms of them being the focal point of their offense.
Yeah. The only thing I would say with Giddey, and I think that's this will come with time, is that he is kind of he avoids contact a lot on drives, and his free throw rate isn't good. He only he takes less than 2 free throws a game, so he's not getting to the line a lot. He's not being aggressive when it comes to kind of finishing through guys versus trying to avoid contact and go through it. I think that was something that LaMelo Ball was heavily criticized about also coming into the league. And LaMelo has gotten better at that, though. So I think Giddey, like the idea with him is to be a very, very good secondary player right now. If he can somehow break through that ceiling and become an all-star, it's because the scoring has gotten better. It's because the free throws and his activity overall, maybe defensively even, has gotten a lot better. So we got OKC, we got Orlando, which by the way, I love the Orlando pick. I think that's a bold take, but I really do enjoy it because Paolo and Franz are the prototypical type of players you want to draft in today's NBA. If someone came up to you and said, "Hey, Lauren, talk to me. I'm an NBA front office and I literally have no idea what basketball is. What should I do?" I would say, look, just look at where, and Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster have done this fine. But look at where the 6'9", 6'10", playmaking, scoring type of guys are and draft those guys. Because those guys have incredibly high ceilings. We've seen it through the last 10 years. The Paul Georges of the world, the Kawhi Leonards of the world, to a different elk, the Pascal Siakams of the world. Those type of guys are not only extremely valuable, but because of their in-between game, they pose such a threat offensively, and because of their size, their length, their ability, they're also not a liability on defense. So you have the perfect combination for that type of player. If you had to pick a specific size for a basketball player in the NBA, it would probably be between 6'6" and 6'9", and maybe even 6'10", because we're talking about Paolo and Franz right now, who are both 6'10" players.
It's crazy.
The fluidity that those guys show is something that is 100% true. It is the making of a superstar, and I really, really do love it. I also want to shout out Markelle Fultz because he had an awesome game last night against the Nuggets. I watched that game. It was genuinely, I really do recommend y'all watch it. It was a great game. But Markelle brings such juice to that team. He brings such pop. And in terms of playmaking, he just kind of makes sense. That team was dying for a point guard, and he just kind of calms things down. In a lot of ways, and I don't mean this as apples to apples comparison here, but he has a lot of the herky-jerky in-between game type style as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's really, really good, kind of like maneuvering his pivot foot, getting into a nice angle and kind of finishing, or maybe finding someone off a backdoor cut. But Markelle can kind of do similar things, but he's just a little bit more loosey-goosey with it. You can see him kind of like getting bumped. He figures it out and then trying to goes up for a layup. It's really, really enjoyable to watch. I would like to hear your third team, though.
My third team, and this kind of comes back to...
I feel like 1 and 2, we know who they are.
We know who they are.
Let's see if we get the... 100% on the test.
I'm nervous. Number 3 for me is Detroit.
Ooh! So, see, we don't have the same list. We do not have the same list. Okay, before you go on your Detroit spiel, I would like to say they are an honorable mention for me. Okay, they are right there. If I had to pick, I just not being able to see Cade this season. It's not that it's changed my perspective on them. I remember I was very, very high. So I was very high on this team. This was the team that I thought you were going to have a hot take on. And maybe this is your hot take, honestly, Lord.
Could be.
But yeah, no. So this was kind of the team I was really high on. I thought they would be a playing team because I love the Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham fit. I thought, maybe Boyan could give them a little bit more of an offensive punch, and he has, but they have a long way to go. I still do think there's a lot of promise there, so talk to me about why they're third on your list.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and the reason also it's relevant as to why I chose them above Orlando and OKC, and really if you were another kind of way that I looked at this is if I were, say, starting like a fantasy draft and I had to pick someone of, okay, who am I building my franchise around? Is this guy a guy that I would pick to build around, start from scratch? And if so, how many of these guys do we have? And I consider Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham to both be one of those guys. And so that's why I put them over both the Thunder and the Magic. I think you could absolutely make a case that Franz is one of those guys, but I'm higher long term on both Cade and Jaden. I just really like their games. I'm also, while I don't think he's necessarily in the same category, I'm so high on Jalen Duren. I think he's a phenomenal player. When they pulled off that trade on draft night, I was like, my God,
massive.
Are they really going to come away with Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren in one draft? That's crazy to me. And so I really like him. Saddiq Bey, I'm operating under the assumption that he's going to be there post-trade deadline, but you never know.
Right.
But I am a big fan of his game. I know he's had a bit of a shaky year shooting-wise, but I think he still has a high ceiling and that he's a good fit with them. And I think he's going to be a really solid player. So, and then you've got Killian Hayes. You've got lots of guys. Who has
figured it out, by the way.
He has figured it out.
Yeah.
He has, which I love to see. I'm very actually curious to see what their long-term plans are, especially if for some reason they do end up with that number 2 overall pick in the draft. I've seen some quite interesting takes on Twitter coming from Pistons Twitter. So that is something that I'm really fascinated to see. But I love what they're doing, and I think they have a lot of potential in terms of even adding to that core, not just through the draft, but that's besides the point. Right now, I think the group that they have, I think they fit well together. I think they're going to grow well together. And even we're already seeing, like, Killian is a great example of some of these guys that are quote unquote late bloomers already starting to figure it out. Hami Diallo, while obviously not the same tier as some of these other guys we're talking about, is a guy that came to Detroit after kind of struggling to keep his spot in a rotation in OKC, comes to Detroit and kind of starts to figure it out and put some things together. So I'm pretty high on Detroit, and I like what they're putting together for sure.
I will say, and I wrote an article about this, folks, by the way, if you want to check it out, newsletter. I wrote about Lauri Markkanen and, kind of the art of pettiness, the lesson on development, and like not giving up on guys, right? Not saying, oh, this guy's a bust 3 years into his league. Did you know that Killian Hayes is 21 years old? He's 21.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's wild to consider because, when we were saying, oh, it's not working out, it's not looking too good, the man was 19 and 20 years old. So yep. I just want to put that into perspective for people who are so quick to be like, oh, there's no way this guy figures it out, because there is a long lifespan of an NBA player now. And also with the fact that, like, we know so much more about development than we did even 20 years ago. It's become such a fun word that people like to throw out there. Development this, development that. People don't realize that development, a big part of that is learning what you can't do, learning what you are not capable of doing. And I think with Killian Hayes, there was this process, especially with adding lead guards beside him, of, okay, how am I going to adapt off the ball? And that was a massive thing for him. Now, to be fair, they have gotten him on the ball more with Cade out this year, and he's sort of looked good in that role. So to your point, I agree. I do wonder what his lifespan on the Pistons is, because of the fact that, look, if they do get that second overall pick, now you have a situation where you have to throw in Scoot Henderson and deal with Scoot, Cade Cunningham, and Jaden Ivey, and I have no idea how that looks on a basketball court. I was talking about 3 guard lineups on the last pod and how fun those are with, Garland, Rubio, Sexton, and then Garland, Mitchell, and Rubio this year potentially. But that's not something you can run out for 82 games. That's just something to throw out there to change things up. It's the change up in baseball. I'm not a baseball guy, but I'm pretty sure I know that's what it means. So I mean, I think, I don't know. That's a tough decision. They'll cross that bridge when they get there. But in terms of why I didn't put Detroit there, it's just because I need to see Cade healthy. And when I see Cade healthy, I might be able to change my mind on this and change kind of where they are in this. So my third team, and I'm surprised because I feel like 2 and 1 are like solidified. No question, no holds barred, no doubt in my mind that the 2 and 1. It's just the order. It's just the order for 2 and 1, which I'm curious about. I'm surprised this team didn't make it to your top 5. I'm gonna go with the Cleveland Cavaliers, ladies and gentlemen.
That's fair.
So I have obviously. I mean, look, when you have 2 All-Stars under the age of 25 already, and one who will potentially be an All-Star. And on top of that, none of those players are the superstar guy that you just traded for. I think I got to consider that. I'm talking about Darius Garland. I'm talking about Jared Allen. And I'm talking about Evan Mobley. When you look at the Cavaliers and what they've built over these 2 seasons, a lot of that has to do with the growth that Darius Garland has had. Him and Sexton in his rookie season were the worst backcourt defensive pairing in the league. Garland hasn't improved a bunch in that category, but he's gotten a little bit better. He's fighting through screens a little bit more. The effort is there, if you will. And I think half of defense is the effort part of things. But when it comes to Garland, he is such an enigmatic playmaker. I would argue he is a better playmaker than SGA. I would say he is a better playmaker than Franz or Paolo or any of those guys right now. I just think he is so good and so divisive in the pick and roll. He just is a wizard when it comes to making plays. He reminds me so much of Steve Nash. And I say that because, like, for some people, it's easier to make those comparisons. I know comparison is the thief of joy. My guy, Samson Folk, is always going to try to remind me of that. But Darius Garland, a lot of the maneuvers he does, he does the Jose Calderon or Steve Nash dribble out sometimes when he's kind of stuck under the rim. And it just reminds me of Steve Nash, the way that he kind of maneuvers in the pick and roll, the way that he uses his burst and his speed to kind of get through little tiny angles and kind of find plays and hook up Jared Allen or hook up Evan Mobley on a lob. And I just think he's a great playmaker. He's a really, like, if the All-Star, and we'll do our All-Star episode at some point in the next couple of weeks, but I mean, he probably could be an All-Star this year. I think there's a genuine conversation for him to be in one. So that's why I'm throwing them there. And then on top of that, you have Jared Allen, who is, I think, like a lot of people, when they saw the deal that he signed for $100 million, were like, whoa, that is a lot for Jared Allen, but he has paid off and then some. The Cavaliers, I believe, are still the number one defense in the NBA. And a lot of that is because of Jared Allen, because he is a rim protecting big who does his job on that end, who is willing to get dunked on continuously. Right. And he's willing to protect the paint at all costs. I think he's been essential to what they do. And he's been essential to what this next guy, Evan Mobley, has been able to do. Because beside Jared Allen, Evan Mobley is free to figure out himself. He is free to fail because there is the backline help of Jared Allen if he misses a if he's late on a rotation or he misses a rotation. To be fair, Evan Mobley is rarely late on rotations or misses rotations because he is a superb defender. I think there's a case to be made that he can be an all-defense player this year. His offense will have to grow, and I think a lot of that is similar to, not positionally, but like similar to Josh Giddey in the sense that like the shooting has to come. He has to develop a little bit more of a touch at the rim. He has to get stronger. He has to finish through guys. And I know they're different positions. I know Giddey and Mobley play different positions, but the aggressiveness aspect and finding your shot, figuring out how to create your own shot, those are two things both of those guys absolutely need to grow in. I do have a ton of confidence in Mobley figuring that out. I think paired with Garland, who is an all-star player who is super young, paired with Allen, who's an all-star player who is super young, and then you have Mitchell, who just missed this, by the way. He is only 26 years old. If this was last year, we could have thrown them all into this. Oh, yeah. And you could maybe even argue they'd be higher on this list.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I look, that's my spiel on Cleveland. I'm a big Cavs guy. You guys saw it. You know me. I'm a big Evan Mobley fan, big Darius Garland fan. So yeah, had to throw them in there.
I like the Cleveland. I think that there's a lot there. And to your point on the Jared Allen deal, I saw a lot of the backlash on that $100 million deal, but what I think a lot of people forget is that it's over 5 years. Right. Locking up a guy like Jared Allen at that stage in his career when you are already starting to see it for 5 years, and in that fifth year, he's only going to be making $20 million because I believe it's a flat rate deal. Right. That's insane value that you're going to have on a guy like that. And then, like you said, how it kind of impacts Evan Mobley on really both ends of the court, honestly. But I really like Cleveland. I think part of the reason that I didn't throw them in here is because I hate to say this, but outside of their kind of win now, it is a young core. It's a young core. So I think it's young. You got me. Yeah. I think you got me. Outside of that, to me, they're very like veteran oriented, win now. And so that's how in my brain, how I view them. But I absolutely think that there's probably a better argument that they should be 3 as opposed to Detroit. So I'll give you that one.
Okay. Fair enough. Look, no, I think with Detroit, there's a long way to go and they're still really young. So I imagine next year when we throw them on this, when they have a Scoot Henderson or a Wembanyama or an Amen or an Oscar Thompson, then we will probably put them on this list. I think there's arguments to be had about a bunch of other teams that I'll throw in some honorable mentions later. So we're down to our top 2, ladies and gentlemen, our top 2 cores. I think there is no question who these top 2 cores are. I assume the people at home who are listening to this podcast are screaming, begging us to say what these 2 top cores are. I imagine for you, in no order in particular, because I'm curious to see what your order is. The New Orleans Pelicans and the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yes, those are my top 2. That's
okay.
Correct. Imagine if I had said, "Oh, I forgot about them."
Oh no, I was the Houston Rockets. Jabari Smith. No.
Oh God, sorry. honorable mention list.
Yes, absolutely on honorable mention. But no, listen, you can't convince me to put them in my top 5. Houston, by the way. So I'm kind of keeping a tally this season on what teams I watch. If I have completed 75% of a game, or if I've watched the second half, or if I've watched the entire game, I kind of like add it into my tally of teams that I've watched. Houston and Charlotte are my least watched teams this year, and that's just because Houston is a very, very tough watch offensively. They are. It's like it's like watching paint dry, but it's also as if you were watching paint dry while someone was like throwing water on the wall that was drying. It's just, it's like, what is going on here? You know, ugh.
Yeah.
And with Charlotte, it's just like, I mean, outside of LaMelo Ball, it's tough to watch. When it comes to the Pelicans and the Grizzlies, though, I'm just going to list their players here for you. In terms of, they also have the top end talent to argue that they have the best young cores of the bunch, but they also have the depth of young talent that I think that, to be fair, to your point earlier about, you know, some of these other teams that have the 4, 5, 6, 7 guy that are young, these guys have it 100%. The Pelicans, they have obviously Zion Williamson, they have Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Dyson Daniels, Trey Murphy III. That is a lot of talent. The Memphis Grizzlies, they have John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Zaire Williams, Santi Aldama. You can probably add a couple of more guys to that, but that is also a lot of talent. From the guys that I mentioned, I'm pretty sure there's 5 All-Star candidates and 2 guys who are surefire All-Stars. Where did you go? Where did you go? Pelicans second, Grizzlies first? Did you go Grizzlies first? What'd you do?
Don't think I didn't remember my hot take from earlier in one of our episodes on who my sleeper team to come out of the West was. But I do have them at number 2. I have Pels 2, Grizzlies 1.
I have the exact same order. So, okay.
Wow.
So outside of Detroit and Cleveland, which we flip-flopped, we have essentially the same order, and OKC and Orlando, we obviously flip-flopped as well. But, I don't know. Listen, Producer Drew, if we could cook up a little graphic here, that would be cool to post on social. But regardless, when it comes to the Pelicans and when it comes to the Grizzlies, I think you can go either way. I really do think you can go either way. The way I looked at this was, okay, John Morant and Zion Williamson are in similar tiers of players. They are about the same tier. I think you can go back and forth on who you value more long-term, who you rely on, but I think and obviously the health issues and whatnot, but I really do think they are in the similar tier of player as of today. Jaren Jackson Jr. versus Brandon Ingram. I also think they're similar, but I think I would pick Ingram in terms. He's probably a little bit higher. Although I already wrote about this year. I really do think Jaren Jackson Jr. has a very good chance of winning the Defensive Player of the Year this season. He has elevated the Grizzlies defense to another level. He absolutely deserves to have some kind of all-star recognition. I don't think he'll get the nod because the forward spot in the West is stacked.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he's in the conversation for it at the very least. And then you have the third guys. And to me, the Pelicans have more third guys than the Grizzlies have third guys. But the Grizzlies have the better third guy of all the third guys. Desmond Bane he topples over Herb Jones, Jose, Dyson, Trey Murphy. I think he's better than all of those guys. Can those guys end up being better than him? I think there's a very good chance that Trey Murphy ends up being better. I think there's a very good chance that maybe even Dyson Daniels.
Dyson, yeah. I'm very high on Dyson.
Right? Yeah, I traded for him in my trade
simulator.
Oh, yeah,
steal.
Yeah,
I don't even need to see the deal.
But so that's why I have the Grizzlies first and I have the Pelicans second. And I think it's because the top 3 of the Grizzlies are it added value. You have John, Zion, who are similar to your players. Jaren and B.I., who, yes, you could probably argue Ingram is a little bit higher on that list for you, but also similar to your players. And then you have Desmond Bane, who is probably better than the rest of the Pelicans bunch. And that's why I give the slight edge, a very slight edge to the Memphis Grizzlies. And I think that's the gist of it when it comes to debating these two teams. I think, we're at the 45-ish mark of this thing, and I kind of want to sum up. You know what? Wait, do you want to do honorable mentions real quick?
Yeah, we can go through them real quick. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I have Toronto as an honorable mention just because Scotty Barnes, Precious Achiuwa, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr. Who knows if they end up trading any of those guys? But at the same time,
Flynn?
Okay, you know what? I'm ending this pod right now. It's the objective. But
I had to throw him in there.
yeah. Listen, Malachi Flynn will probably be an NBA player, or at the very least, a very good European basketball player. But I don't mean to be mean. I don't mean to be mean. That's a great thing to be.
Yeah,
you know, do you think? Yeah,
it is.
Hell yeah. Do you think? But like, look, it's tough to see him struggle like this back and forth. Regardless, not talking about Malachi Flynn here. The Toronto Raptors, they're probably an honorable mention because just like we mentioned with Mobley, just like we mentioned with Cade, Scotty Barnes has that superstar type potential. I think he's had a struggling second year to kind of find his footing, but that is completely normal and that is completely regular. And then you have the OG Anunobys and the Precious Achiuwas of the world, which I think adds some value. Detroit, you mentioned. I had Utah in there as well. Okay. I don't know if you did because they had like Lauri Markkanen, Jared Vanderbilt, Colin Sexton, whatnot. I think it's a decent core. It's interesting enough to work on, especially because Markkanen is looking like an all-star, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I did not include them, but it is definitely fair. I'm obviously very high on Markkanen. I tweet about him probably once a week, but but yeah, I did not include them just because to me, it's not stable enough right now, but I think if you're focusing on right now, they have enough talent and enough guys that have ceilings to include them for sure. So absolutely. I think that's fair.
Any other honorable mentions? I have a couple more here, but I wanted to see.
Yeah, I really just had four. I had the Raptors, the Rockets, the Pacers, and the Knicks. Those were kind of the four main ones that I had. Again, I think you could make a case for more, but like I said, those are probably my main four.
I think Miami deserves an honorable mention here too, just because of Bam and Tyler Hero. I mean, just because of top tier talent, they're definitely up there. And yeah, to your point, Indiana and Houston are up there as well. I mean, Indiana really has reshaped themselves in a big way with Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mather, and Andrew Nembhard, even like Aaron Nesmith and whatnot. They've really consolidated some really, really good young guys that they could work with. I wonder if they make a win now move. We've talked about that in the last episode. You can check that out if you'd like to on the Objective Basketball Podcast. But the summation of this, I think the end thing I would want to finish off here on, and I don't know, Lauren, if you have any other notes you want to mention, but the NBA is in such a good spot talent-wise. I remember watching as a kid, and maybe it was because I was a kid and I wasn't as in tune with every single player and every single roster, but it really does feel like it has been the best product that I've watched ever, basketball-wise. And I think it's just because there is so much more talent in the league. We talk about the offensive explosion. Again, I don't mean to plug myself like an a-hole here, but I wrote about the offensive explosion on the newsletter that you can check out. And a lot of that is because of the talent that we see in the NBA today. Because every single team has an offensive guy who can create baskets for you. Every single team has that guy who is a matchup nightmare. You even look at guys, teams at the bottom of the standings. You still have to deal with LaMelo Ball when you're facing the Charlotte Hornets. You still have to deal with, usually you would have to deal with Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, whatnot when it comes to the Detroit Pistons. You still have to figure out how to guard Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. on the Houston Rockets, although they guard themselves because they never pass the ball. And you can also say that you have to worry about Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson. At the very bottom of the league, the talent has gotten so much better. And at the very top of the league, the talent is still very, very good. And I think that gap has gotten so much smaller because every single year we are getting better basketball players. This is the golden age of basketball. And these young cores are proof of that because a lot of the teams that we mentioned are currently playoff or play-in teams. The Grizzlies, they are at the top of the Western Conference. The Pelicans, they're at the top of the Western Conference. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they are near, I believe they're still a top 6. Yeah, they are still a top 6 team. The Orlando Magic, they are a feisty team that you would have to guard every single night. I think the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're trying to be a play-in team. Some of these honorable mentions that we mentioned, the talent in the NBA is at its best right now. And it's an incredible thing to watch. So, Lauren?
No, I mean, I'm right there with you. It's crazy because even not to get in too much into the tanking of it all, but in terms of the talent at like the quote unquote bottom of the league. I mean, they are, I guess, with the standings, but some of these young cores that we're seeing being built out right now that we just went through, I mean, it's only a matter of time. And I'm not talking like 5 to 7 years. I'm talking like in the shorter term, these kind of potential powerhouse teams. I'm not saying they're all going to be able to put it together or that everybody's going to be working together and be happy about it. Or, I mean, we're already kind of seeing that a little bit, but, there's so much potential for trios or duos that just are going to be problems for potentially long-term, I guess, periods of time. And we're kind of seeing that, I guess, come to fruition right now with the Celtics and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, what it looks like to really have a truly just dynamic duo that's on the same kind of trajectory and timeline, to have them together and playing at such a high level. We're seeing what a dangerous kind of team like that can be and how dominant they can be in not just the Eastern Conference, but the league. And it's crazy to think that with the age of tanking and with just the current landscape of the league, how many teams we might potentially have at some point where it's like, how do you even predict who the favorite is? Or obviously, I mean, there are just so many moving factors constantly, but I completely agree. This is the golden age of basketball. And I'm so excited for kind of what the future holds. And especially as we continue to see year after year with these draft classes, just some of the top talent and just the depth of some of these drafts. And you never even know who the sleepers are going to be. So it's such a wonderful time to be an NBA fan. Things are great. So I don't know. We'll see how it all shakes out and who gets this next kind of winning piece, especially in this next draft. It's
very cool because while you still have the Zion Williamsons, the John Morants, the Luka Doncic's, the Anthony Edwards, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexanders of the world. I'm sorry if I'm missing any, but you get what I mean. When you have these young superstar players, but you also have the LeBron Jameses of the world, the Kevin Durant's of the world, the Chris Pauls of the world, the Paul Georges, the Kawhi Leonards, kind of that Steph Curry, the kind of like that era that is sort of, it's aging out. When you have them still competing at a very, very high level, and you also have these young guys that are competing at an extremely high level, it just makes it so that it's tough to predict what's going to happen next. And I think that's what parity has created. I think that's what the play-in has created also.
Yeah,
it's made it so that, you don't know who is going to be a buyer and a seller. And I think, not to get too much into the trade topics again, but I think that's why we're not seeing a ton of movement right now. And maybe that'll pick up in the next couple of weeks. I've heard that there are some teams that are really, really starting to consider their options here. Right. But when it comes to like, hey, are we a buyer or a seller? I think that's very hard to determine nowadays because of the play-in, because of the fact that everybody thinks they have a shot. So it's an interesting time, and I think the NBA is changing, it's evolving. It's kind of a passing of the torch season, if you will, because there are some of these older guys that are aging out, and these new guys are taking their spots. It's really, genuinely, it's an exciting time to be a basketball fan. So I appreciate you guys listening. Lauren, I appreciate you listening to my spiels.
Back at you.
Yeah, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have listened all this way, thank you for listening to the Objective Basketball Podcast. Go ahead and do the subscriptions and the likes and the ratings and whatnot. Maybe even give me a 5-star rating, but then just blast me in the review. So this guy has a very annoying voice, but I'm going to give him 5 stars anyways. That's what you should do. So I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much. We will see you guys later in the week for another episode of the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Follow hosts at Just S Baraheni on all socials and at the Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.